I'm Janet Linus, the ICFRC board member and host for today's program. We thank our members, volunteers, and interns for making these forums possible since the Korean Airlines 007 with 269 aboard was shot down without warning by the USSR in 1983. So that's your trivia for today. So I want to acknowledge our university and community sponsors, the University of Iowa's International Program, the University of Iowa's Honors Program, the University of Iowa Public Policy Center, and the Stanley U of I Foundation Support Organization for their financial support. And I also thank today's special sponsors, Alan and Ken Atkinson, Mason K. Braverman, Midwest One, and Civic. I also thank City Channel 4 for their professionally recording our programs that are cablecast on City Channel 4 or 118-2 and the U of I Library's digital archives. Be sure to like City Channel 4 on Facebook, if you would. Now, at this time, it is my pleasure to introduce Alberto Puliafito and Giovanni Pagella. Pagella? They have it wrong. Zanye, sorry. We have it wrong on my script here. Alberto is the editor-in-chief and co-founder of Slow News. Alberto is an Italian journalist, director, and producer, entrepreneur, publisher, and media specialist. He is also editor of Wolf, a B2B Italian magazine about communication and media. Giovanni is the editor-in-chief from Pagella Politica, an Italian fact-checking website, and the site is totally devoted to political fact-checking and monitoring statements made by Italian politicians. Giovanni works with Facebook to find and debunk political fake news. Disinformation was a hot topic in the European and U.S. media and policy circles, and during the first half of 2018, the Italian media regularly covered warnings about potential negative effects of disinformation on Italy's democracy. Our speakers will address disinformation and building trust with audiences to promote ethical journalism. Please join me in welcoming Alberto Puliafito and Giovanni Zanye. Okay, thank you.
So, first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here. And sorry if my English is not as good as I wish, but I'll try to do my best. I'm trying to tell you something about this entrepreneurial adventure we started in Italy, which is called Slow News, and also about what we have called the slow journalism movement across the world, and also about the fact that we are definitely in crisis times with journalism and newspapers and all the other institutions, and so we have to be creative in this context. In 2014, Chris Anderson, Emily Belli, and Clay Shirky wrote a very important issue, which is called Post-Industrial Journalism, Adapting to the Present. And I've extracted this quote, which is, if you believe that journalism matters and there is no solution to the crisis, the only way to get the journalism we need in the current environment is to take advantage of new possibilities, which means that we need to adapt our job as journalists and even the attitude of news consumers to contemporary issue and landscape. Why do they say that we have a crisis and there is no solution with this model to the crisis? Because we have a lot of problems. As journalists and newspaper, we have, of course, a business model problem. A friend of mine told me once that journalism is the only market where the end customer is badly treated, because too many times we focused on advertisers and not on readers or listeners or in general the audience, which is actually our end customer. And then we have also a product problem, because we weren't able to adapt our product to the landscape, which is a landscape very difficult, where we should focus ourselves to deliver our journalistic content as a service to the audience and not only as content themselves. which lead us to another problem, which is the context. We are living and working in a context of overproduction and of over-delivery of content. I mean, thanks to the so-called digital disruption, which actually is a word I don't like too much, but we call in this period in this way, thanks to the digital disruption, everybody is a content producer or even a content broadcaster. I mean, we can go live on Facebook with our smartphone, and 20 years ago it was simply impossible. You need a satellite truck outside of the building to be live on Facebook. So, of course, it's a problem, the digital disruption for the traditional journalism, but it's also a big opportunity. And actually, it was very difficult for us as journalists, of course, generally speaking, to find a way to struggle with this situation where people attention can be caught by everyone contents. So we are going to compete with kittens pictures or incredible and curious videos and so on. And one of the answers was to put this kind of content on newspapers too. So, for example, in a great part of Italian newspapers on the digital platforms, you can find this kind of content which are not news at all. In this content, we have also another problem, which I called a sort of free speech hacked problem. What do I mean by this? I mean that since the disintermediation between politicians and people, politicians can reach the audience without the newspaper. They don't need the newspaper anymore to spread their message. And so they can basically tell whatever they want. And as reporters, we often simply record what they are saying and report what they are saying without putting these kind of sentences in context. And so we are doing our job, but we are also amplifying their messages. And we haven't found a way to solve this problem too. This leads us to another problem, which is a trust problem. I mean, since you can find also misinformation or disinformation or even propaganda on real newspapers, this is a perfect context for the so-called fake news, which is a label that I actually don't like too much, because we have always have this kind of content provided and delivered with a profit purpose. I mean, propaganda is also a kind of fake news, if you want to use this label. And since you can find not accurate content on newspapers, of course we have a trust problem. Which is also used by politicians to say, see, you have to find something that was misrepresented by journalists, so you can trust them. They are fake news, and that's a struggle. And it's like a vicious circle with a never-ending story, and we don't know actually how to avoid this. We also have a relationship problem with our audience, because too many times we forgot that that our job is something like a mission and not only a job. And we should serve you, and we should provide you the properly content and context and so on. And then we have a big problem in definition of contemporary journalism and in the use of appropriate metrics to measure journalism quality and effectiveness. And I want to show you very short clip I recorded in St. Petersburg with a wonderful journalist which is called Mark Douglas. And I think that his words can show you in a very appropriate way the kind of problems journalists are struggling with.
After 42 years in journalism, one of the primary reasons I decided to retire is because I just could not stand the idea of having to produce investigative stories 3, 4, sometimes 5 times a week. It was overwhelming. The quality was suffering. It wasn't an investigation anymore. I wasn't doing what I intended to do, what I set out to do, and it was just time to move on.
So, he told us that his last investigative report was about the foster system in Tampa Bay and St. Petersburg, and it was actually an amazing work. And it took 1 month, 2 months, I don't remember exactly, 3 months and a half, 2 months and a half, okay, thank you. I don't want to spread fake news. 2 months and a half to have a proper job, because they have to follow the story. And at one point, someone in his newspaper asked him, please produce 5 different investigative reports on a week. And of course, he had to retire, because how can you be a good journalist if you have this kind of pressure? It's impossible. So, alternatives. Since for a lot of time someone told us that there is no alternative, but I don't trust this, and I'm looking for something else. We can do what we have always done, and in response to this attitude, which is actually basically what we choose to do. I want to quote Albert Einstein, which is widely credited with saying, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. The problem with this sentence is that Albert Einstein never said it. Okay? So it's basically a fake news, but it works. It works a lot. We could give up and stop doing our job as journalists. And of course, if I'm here, I don't think that this is a solution. Or we can think outside the box and find some other ways to be journalists in this never-ending cycle of the so-called 24/7 news cycle. And this means to create something different. But there are two things that we have to do to create something different. We of course need to be out of the 24/7 news cycle, because if you try to imagine what a newsroom is doing right now, if they have to provide the next number of their hard copy newspaper, of course they are working on a daily basis. And they are not able to plan their job, and so it's very difficult to even to think to something different if you are stuck in this kind of never-ending job. And of course, I strongly suggest to be sometimes out of the overwhelming, not useful and toxic social conversation. Not because I think that social media are bad. I don't think so. They are extraordinarily. I wouldn't be here probably without Facebook and Google and so on, because my job is definitely on the digital part of the landscape. But sometimes you have to get out yourself from this continuous discussion and finding something different. So fortunately, I'm here to present also the alternatives. And first of all, I found Googling slow news. It was, I think, 4 years ago. And at that time, I was the editor-in-chief of a big Italian digital newspaper, and our job was basically to bring clicks and people looking even for 3 or 4 seconds to our websites, because our business model was based only on advertising. So my job was not providing good journalism, but was providing clicks on our websites. And so we exaggerated the headlines. We used the social media in a way like, oh, you can never imagine what can you see in this video. Please click on that, and so on. This is not journalism at all. And once I was starting thinking about something different, and I occasionally read an article about a comparison between news and food consumption. And since in Italy we have the slow food movement, I thought about slow news, and I Googled it. So, as you can see, digital platforms can be useful, because I found this amazing book by Professor Peter Lofer. He's a professor at the University of Eugene in Oregon, School of Journalism, of course. And then, thanks to Peter Lofer, I had the opportunity to go to Oregon, Eugene, and I've met Jennifer Roach, which was working on this other book, which is called Slow Media. And it's very interesting because she took the slow food definition of what slow food is, which is good, clean, and fair food, and she tried to apply this definition to news. So slow news is good, clean, and fair journalism. And then I wrote a book myself with another Italian journalist, which is called Daniele Nalbone. And in this book, we are trying to explain what we intend by slow journalism and why we think that to be a slow journalist today is like a form of activism. And then I've started looking for other people acting in the same way, and I was very lucky because I found a lot of newsrooms which are trying to provide people this kind of journalism, even if they don't call them, even if they don't use the label slow news, but they have the same attitude. For example, I found Zetland, which is a Danish journalistic startup. And then, of course, in Italy, we have Internazionale. They have a very interesting model because they are picking up the best articles they can find in foreign newspapers and translate it in Italian, so people who can speak in other languages can read these articles. And then I found, for example, the Delay Gratification. They are a UK-based magazine, and they have this wonderful claim, which is, we are the last to break the news. And since Zetland, for example, is digital only, and they provide their members, they love to call their reader members, not subscribers, not readers, not audience, but members, because they want to let them feeling part of a community. So the first one is digital only, and they are providing their members only 2 or 3 articles in a day because they don't want to produce too much. And the second one is only an hard copy magazine, but they use, of course, the digital platform as a marketing tool to spread their messages and their magazine. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful. They are quarterly, and they only deal about news which are ended 3 months before, because they want to deal only with stories that in some way ended. Then I found the Correspondent. They are Dutch, and they also tried to have a big crowdfunding in English, and had for a couple of years an headquarters in Manhattan, and they were able to find almost 50,000 subscribers without having published anything in English, just by the message they are spreading with their website. And then, for example, I found this magazine, which is another quarterly hard copy magazine, which is called America, and it's a French magazine, and they want to explain the U.S. to French people. And they decided, it's funny because they decided to publish the magazine only during the so-called Trump age. So they are planning to finish at least their first season at the end of the 4th year, and we don't know if they will continue or not. And then, of course, there is my journalistic startup in Italy, which is called Slow News. We basically found that all these newsrooms, even from different perspectives, use almost the same business model, which is focusing on people who can afford to pay for news. In several cases, they have some kind of advertising. For example, Internazionale in Italy has some kind of advertising. We personally refuse completely the advertising model because I think that if you're trying to do something new, you have to be very clear with your statement and your mission, and so you can't try to copy the old part of journalistic business model. And they are all focused on a strong relationship with the audience, so they organize live events, and they want to treat their to have a relationship with their members as expert members. So we are not the journalists here to teach you something or explain you something, but we know that maybe you know something for your job or your personal life that we don't know, and we can have an exchange. And they are focusing not only on problems, for example, when they are reporting, but also on possible solutions. So they don't want you to have only bad news with exaggerated headlines, which doesn't mean that we have to not to try to be journalists and to be the watchdog of the power and of companies and politicians and so on, but that we have also to try to provide some solutions, not only the problems. They focus on less quotes and more facts. They try to put quotes in context, and they try to give their audience the most accurate description of the complexity of the reality, which is not all black and white, but it's very, very complicated to explain. And they are trying also to have this business model, asking people for paying, but they know that it's difficult because not everybody can afford to pay or want to pay for reading news. And so, for example, the correspondent in the Netherlands and we in Italy are trying a little bit different business model, which we call pay how much as you can. And we are trying to say, okay, this is our job. We think that you should pay at least $100 for a year, but please feel free to pay even zero if you can't afford it. And we hope that who can manage to pay more will help us paying more and providing this content to people who can't pay at all. Because we think that it's important to let our journalistic job to spread even if people can't pay. I'm trying to put all this in a documentary movie, which was very difficult to fund. We are doing different jobs to finance it and to finance also this kind of journalism. I'm working on this movie since 2016, and we have almost finished it. That's all. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Janet, for the introduction. Thank you, Alberto, for your wonderful presentation. And thank you for being here today. I'm really excited to be in Iowa City because after so many days, this journey really looks longer. After a few days in Washington, New York, this is kind of going like back home because I come from a small agricultural city in northern Italy. It's called Mantua, which you may know only if you are very literate or very boring, because it is the place where Romeo goes after he has to leave Verona in Romeo and Juliet by Shakespeare. So otherwise it's not known for anything else except for, pig farming maybe. Yeah. So I'm very excited to be here. First, I will present a little bit of Pagella Politica, what we do, and then I will delve deeper into our partnership with Facebook, stating that I need to state before that my views, I speak only on my personal behalf, and what I'm going to say doesn't represent at all any position or whatever shared by Facebook. I'm going to speak in English, which promises you other 20 minutes of bad English. Actually, I know that I have to improve because my girlfriend is American, and we usually speak English, actually. But when we got into, like a fight, on how long must the coffee be or something like that, she tells me, okay, but if we're going to fight in Italian, because she's been living there for 12 years, and so she knows Italian much better than I know English, and she wants that the message arrives clear. So what is Pagella Politica? Pagella Politica is the only Italian platform which is exclusively dedicated to political fact-checking, mainly. We were launched in 2012, and since then we have verified more or less 2,500 claims by Italian politicians, because apparently they continue to tell untrue things, even if we verify them every day. Yeah, sounds strange, but that's what happens. And we work with a couple of major Italian outlets. One is the national broadcaster, RAI. We have a short segment on fact-checking in one of their political talk shows. And the other one is a national newswire agency called AGI. And then we also have a partnership ongoing since 2018 with Facebook. We are part of a couple of international projects. One is a very, very interesting, super exciting project called Fact Check EU, when we partnered with, I would say, like 20 other fact-checking organizations from all over Europe, and we checked statements that had to do with the European election that we had earlier this year. And we are part of another project called SOMA, which is a EU-funded project to basically build a network of fact-checking organizations around Europe. But I will focus on Facebook today. We are part of the so-called third-party fact-checking program, and which was launched in I would say at the beginning of 2017, because a couple of things happened in 2016. The first one is that the Brexit referendum resulted into the UK deciding to exit the European Union. This hasn't happened yet, but apparently they continue to tell that it will. And the other things that you may have been heard of is that Donald Trump got elected in November of that year. After that event, especially, if you look at on Google Trends at if you put a query on fake news, the graph does something like that. So it spikes up a lot. So like in the hours and then days and weeks and months after the election, fake news became a huge issue in the whole world. And a lot of that discourse went also around what was happening on Facebook. So Facebook came out the year after that with a strategy to fight the spread of false news on the platform, which is based on four items, 4 steps. The first one is identifying that content that could be labeled as false news. The other one is reviewing content. The third one is showing false content lower in newsfeed. I will come back to that. And finally, taking action against repeat offenders. Now, what we are involved into is the second step as a fact checkers. So reviewing that content is the only one that we are part of through the third-party fact-checking program, which is really super fascinating and I would say ambitious and interesting and not so much well-known, I must say. It was launched officially in December 2016, and now it has gradually expanded to countries throughout the world. It involves today 39 countries around the world with 56 partnering organizations. So that means obviously that some countries has more than one. For example, in the USA, I know for sure that PolitiFact is part of that, and which is a Pulitzer-winning fact-checking organization based at the Poynter Institute in Florida. And also Snopes used to be part of that, but it is not part of that anymore. And there are also 1 or 2 other organizations in the USA that I actually don't know which they are, I'm sorry. But for Italy, we are the only one. Pagella Politica is the only organization that does that. What do we do? Well, basically we have access to a tool provided by Facebook that lists the items that were flagged by users as possible false news. So if you see some content posted by your friends on Facebook, you can flag that for various reasons. You can flag that because to Facebook because it is, I don't know, violent, or it is pornography, or it is, I don't know, like a live stream of a violent event going on. And you can also flag that because you think it's false news. So what happens that if you do that? Basically, Facebook collects all those flags and put that into a list that we have access to, and then we decide which one to check out of that list. At the end, we can do that on text as well as pictures and videos. And then at the end we have to come out with a rating system. For example, we can state at the end that it is false or true or opinion or satire or whatever. Now I'm going to give you some examples of the things that we have checked, because I think that it tells a lot about which kind of disinformation you can find on the Italian internet and what our work consists of. So I will start with this one because this is actually a picture that I saw on Facebook. So I don't know. Obviously, when you are on Facebook, you don't have time to check everything that comes in front of your eyes, because otherwise that would be basically what you do for a living. But I don't know. So one afternoon, I was I randomly scrolling down the Facebook timeline, and I saw this picture. Then I don't know, I had something to do, like I was interrupted. Maybe I got into a fight with my girlfriend, I don't remember. But there was this picture of this guy, and he is playing guitar. I'm moving, but I think you can hear me. So he's apparently holding a guitar. It has his hands were toward the end, but they had this bar. I don't know how it's called in English.
Mobile capo. Mobile capo.
Okay,
Capo tasto.
great. What the guy? Thank you, Alessio. He's the musician of the group. I'm not, as you can understand. So I said, okay, but this could be, I don't know, could be just a picture taken in a moment when the guy wasn't playing. So if you are just sitting with a guitar, maybe you can just put your hand, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense, right? To do that, because if you strike the chords, yeah, you're going to make always the same. So in this picture, make long story short, this guy looks pretty stupid. And who's this guy? I haven't said that, and there's a reason for that. Because probably if you know one name of an Italian politician today, because you are very informed, you know Matteo Salvini, right? Well, Matteo Salvini, even if he's like 99% of the political coverage of Italy, is not the prime minister. And this is funny, because actually the prime minister is this guy. And he's called Giuseppe Conte. So there was this photo of the guy, and I didn't check that. I didn't get if the guy was actually doing this really stupid thing with a guitar. But after one day, my newsroom published one article in the context of the Facebook partnership. This was published on the 24th of December 2018, and actually it comes out that this picture was modified to add that thing that Alessio said, which wasn't there originally in the original picture. You can see the original picture here. It's a little bit small, but there is no...
Mobile capo.
Thank you. I do that all the time, also randomly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, super fun. So somebody apparently has spent some time the day before Christmas to add this perfectly to the picture. But this can be like just a funny story, not so interested and doesn't have so much impact. It starts to get a little bit sketchier if you look at this one. We look at this one because this has to do with the immigrant crisis that we have in Italy in the past 3-4 years. So this is the picture that was published online of a lot of Italian, there are some Italian members of parliament, also very well-known one. This, for example, is the president, is it still the president? I don't remember. Of the Democratic Party for many years until very recently. It's called Matteo Orfini. This one used to be the second to Matteo Renzi. He's called Graziano Del Rio. And this one is a very well-known left-wing politician called Nicola Fratoianni, which is the head of a left-wing party in Italy, a small one, but still pretty well known. And as you can see, they are on board of this boat, and they are having this lavish table of seafood in front of them, right? So the story here is that some left-wing politicians and MPs, instead of going to help a boat that was blocked by the Italian authorities outside an Italian port, they were just having this lavish meal. So it was just, I don't know, of course, a publicity stunt. And that action doesn't have actually any real significance. But if you look at the original picture, that also was modified. So that was this fake photo that went online, and you can see that actually who made that choose this photo not casually, because there's some kind of I don't know, like this is an astute thing to do, because if you look at Fratoianni, it looks like don't take this picture. So it was pretty consistent with this idea that they were having this meal, which obviously is totally fake. So this one is another, also because it doesn't make any sense to have this huge table on such a small boat. I mean, but whatever. The third example that I wanted to show you is similar to this one, and is a photo that was spread online of the Minister of Defense, who's called Elisabetta Trenta, of the present government, that went to a ceremony for the Italian Navy, basically carrying a grocery bag, right? And what's interesting, this is really interesting for two reasons. The first one is that also in this case, this is a fake photo. It has been modified to have the bag, because this is the official one, and you can't see that, of course. You can't see the grocery bag. And the second one, which is super fascinating, is that this picture actually attacks the present government. So even if we tend to think, especially in Italy, that this kind of fake news come all from the same political side, and for example, they tend to basically attack the left wing, the Democratic Party and stuff like that. You can see some examples of those kind of content actually attacking more like simply the people in power, because they are the people in power. This is really important because it relates to who can be behind this kind of content. And well, there are many different theories behind that. We cannot, for example, say decisively that in Italy we have seen Russian disinformation campaigns going on, as there are proof, for example, for the USA or for France. But we can say that there are producers of this kind of fake news that are in it only just for the money, just for having people going to sketchy websites or subscribing to Facebook pages in order to have very big numbers, and at the end of the day, earning some money through the internet advertising systems. But in this field, there is much more to do. This is more to do with we as Pagella Politica want and plan to do in the near future, and we want to understand more about who's behind that and who produces this kind of content. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you for your patience, and that's all.
How does slow news differ from what monthly magazines or quarterly journals have done and are doing?
Yeah. It basically differs because you can have that kind of approach even for a daily newspaper. You have just to cut dramatically the amount of content that you provide on a daily basis newspaper, and so you can do the same job. And it differs because it's struggling with the changing environment and media landscape. I've told before, so it's different because it's trying to adapt to the situation, and it's a sort of a reaction to the context.
And you may want to stay up here, because the next question will be for you too. Financially, are magazines doing better than newspapers?
It's difficult to say because I don't have data, and then Giovanni could fact check me, and I wouldn't be accurate. But what can I say is that, for example, in Italy, the magazine I've shown, Internazionale, which is weekly, has an increasing number of members and of hard copy sold day by day, and they see a spike every time they have the festival in Ferrara where they meet people. So this means that when you have a live event, you can encourage people to pay for a newspaper. And I think that it's probably one of the very few Italian newspapers which are gaining from their job, but I can't speak in general.
This one might be more for Giovanni. Are you familiar with Snoops, which I think you mentioned it, so you probably are, and how does it differ from what you are doing?
Thank you for the question. This is super easy. Yeah, I'm familiar with them. We do the very same thing. Just in Italian. And they tend not to speak about political disinformation. They're much more on like hoaxes and viral hoaxes and stuff like that. We do that also, just a little bit less, but it's basically the same.
You may want to stay here because I think this one will be towards you too. Why is Facebook pushing fake news down rather than out?
Okay.
If you can answer that.
Well, I can't speak for Facebook, so actually I don't know. But what they do is that they take the content that has been flagged as false and they they downplay the rate at which it expands on timelines up to 80%. What I can think of about as my personal opinion, and please Facebook don't sue me, I'm speaking to the camera now, is that they don't want to remove content and because that could be perceived as censorship.
For either of you, I guess, what can you say about the EU's rapid alert system?
So I'm not sure if I know exactly what is referring to this, but if it has to do with the so-called Stratcom strategy toward fake news, so it is a part of the Foreign Relationship Service of the European Union that also has to do with the spread of disinformation. Well, I've known them, I've heard them speak at events, but I must say that they are 100% focused on Russian-born, Russian-produced disinformation, which, according to me, is only a part of the problem. So it's not, especially in Western Europe, in Eastern Europe, it is different. But in Western Europe, this is not the problem. So kind of find them a little bit too militant in what they do. Please don't sue me. You're
safe here. Has either of you found a way to measure the impact of your efforts to correct fake or politically biased news? For example, is there any sense of what proportion of the population tunes in to your efforts?
Yes, we have some metrics. I must say that our website is pretty small, even if I'm sure that in Iowa City we are going to gain a lot of traction after this screen here. Even if you don't understand Italian, it's okay. But yeah, our website is pretty small, but through our partnership, mainly with the newswire agency AGI, I know that for sure that our fact-checking articles are between the most viewed every day, basically, on their website. So I must say that we have some kind of impact in terms of audience. We are able to reach through them a pretty substantial audience, I think, in Italy, and also in journalists. But on the other hand, it is true that it is difficult to measure the impact, especially on the public discourse, because usually politicians that get checked tend to correct their statements without saying, thanks to the fact that somebody called me a liar, I'm not going to repeat the liar anymore, right? Yeah. So there has been a couple of times when that happened. The one that I remember more clearly, and it is more clear-cut, is that it happened that basically, I went on TV and I said that one Italian politician was wrong about the fact that Italy is not the only country in the world to have mandatory vaccines. It is not. The actual politician that said that came on video right after me and said that guy had to learn because it is not true, and that was a fantastic occasion to run an article which had a pretty good success, saying that he was actually really wrong. After that, he stopped doing that claim. So I can't say that it was thanks to me, but could be, yeah. Makes sense that had an impact. But since we have like 3,000 statements that we checked, this is not so encouraging if it is the only example that I can come up to it. Thank you.
I'm just going to add to this part that I personally think that you can measure the impact on the long period and not on the short one. So if we are providing context to these sentences, probably we will see the effects on the long period. But we have to be able to spread this kind of content too, and it's difficult. And that's the reason why we need also you, and not only our journalistic job. We need you to help us spreading and sharing and talking people. Yeah, okay, maybe you can try to look at this if you only believe what your favorite politician is saying, but there is another point of view. So please help us. We need you.
Yeah. Go ahead. If you had something more. Oh, no. Okay. Well, and since I'm the host, I get to ask the final question, which is, what is your prediction for the future? What are we going to be seeing in the future?
I don't want to say something like nobody will want to have a computer in his house. This is the kind of tradition that people always do when someone asks you, what do you think about the future? I'm positive. I have to say that I'm positive because this is definitely a golden age for our job. We have a lot of opportunities and we can use that opportunities. But I know we are living in very difficult times. So it's a struggle, and we have in some way to fight it. But I think that journalism will find a way. Maybe not in the traditional way, but I think that we will find a way.
Well, since we decided to play the good cop and the bad cop, he's the good cop. I'm going to be the bad cop. I think that we haven't reached the bottom of it yet, neither in the U.S. Nor in Italy, because in some sense we were speaking with some people yesterday who are from the Iowan Association of Federation of Republican Women, I think was the exact name, and it became clear very soon that actually we had basic misunderstandings also on the basic facts. So we weren't able to, not very much us, because I'm going to play the other side, but actually we were just there to listen. So looks like we are going toward a situation where people can't agree on basic things like numbers and the hard facts behind things. And I think we haven't seen the full consequences of this yet. On the other hand, what we are seeing in the social media world is also super fascinating, and it is going to impact this a lot, because Mark Zuckerberg went to a presentation a couple of weeks ago, or months ago, I don't remember, just right before we started this journey, which apparently started like 5 years ago. And he went there and said, the future is private. So this means that big social media companies are going toward a model where much of the discussion will be into closed groups. So closed Facebook, WhatsApp chats, closed Facebook groups, places that are not open even in theory. They're going to be encrypted. And so I'm saying that we haven't seen the bottom of it, because the next future for the social media is that this kind of conversation are going to be shifted toward closed groups, and it will be super difficult for third parties, so to say, to go into that conversation and try to correct something or just put some doubts on that. So I think that this can get worse because it gets better.
I should have had Alberto go last. Sorry. Anyhow, but now, unfortunately, we have to conclude our program, but I want to give a big thank you to Alberto and Giovanni for their wonderful presentations. And I also want to thank our sponsors, the University of Iowa's International Programs, the University of Iowa's Honors Program, the University of Iowa Public Policy Center, and the Stanley U of I Foundation Support Organization for their generous support. And we also thank today's special sponsors, Mason K. Braverman, Alice and Ken Atkinson, Midwest One Bank, and Civic. And we also thank City Channel 4 for making our programs available to viewing audiences. So Alberto and Giovanni, as a small token of our appreciation, we are happy to present you with our very highly coveted Iowa City Foreign Relations Council mugs. And
Thank you.
don't.
This is fantastic.
Yes,
Thank
it's. Please do not fact check whether they are highly coveted or not, but I think they are.
Actually, yesterday I bought a T-shirt with Iowa Nice.
And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.